بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to you all. I hope you're all doing well. I'm your host Shabir, and welcome to Hajj with Eman Academy. Alhamdulillah, we have this great opportunity today. We're going to be speaking about the journey of a lifetime, and the days that we're currently in, subhanallah, are the days of Hajj, and we have with us in our presence today, very fortunate indeed, some of our beloved teachers and tutors from Eman Academy, inshallah, who need no introduction whatsoever. But still, of course, I will take you through from my right. We have Mufti Menk. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you, Sheikh?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. We have, following on, Sheikh Wasim. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
And finally, we have Sheikh Asim Khan. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alhamdulillah. Welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you who have just tuned in, if you're not aware, then you should know that, of course, these are our tutors from Eman Academy. And the best thing about having them on the panel today is the diversity, because they all teach different subjects. Alhamdulillah, we have a mixture of seerah, which we're going to be coming to shortly, inshallah. And we also have the fiqh side of things, hadith, and Quran/Tafsir, inshallah. So it's going to be a really interesting discussion that we're going to have, not just on Hajj, but how Hajj is talked about in the Quran, the different rulings of Hajj, and many burning questions that I'm sure many of you have, that inshallah that we're going to be covering through our shuyukh, inshallah. We're going to get straight into it because, of course, as always, we're very short on time, but there's so much to discuss, especially now that we're entering and approaching these days of Hajj. Mufti Menk, I wanted to start with yourself, inshallah, as a general kind of overview about Hajj. Many people, the first question they have is, why do we perform Hajj in the first place? And the different maybe narrations that touch on Hajj itself and the pilgrimage, inshallah.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. I think primarily we need to know that it is the instruction of Allah that makes us fulfill the Hajj, because Islam is based on 5 pillars, and the Prophet ﷺ says that in the hadith, بُنِيَ الْإِسْلَامُ عَلَى خَمْسٍ شَهَادَةِ أَن لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَأَنِّي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ وَإِقَامِ الصَّلَاةِ وَإِيتَاءِ الزَّكَاةِ وَصَوْمِ رَمَضَانِ وَحَجِّ الْبَيْتِ لِمَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. The translation of it, it's the 5 pillars of Islam that Islam is built upon, and the last one happens to be going for Hajj, of the fulfillment of the pilgrimage for the one who is able and capable. Based on that, it is compulsory upon us. There is a history of it that is of interest, but the obligation actually became at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and he made it clear to the degree that one of his companions by the name of Al-Aqra' ibn Habis radiyallahu anhu asked him, Afi kulli amin ya Rasulallah, should we fulfill this every year, O Messenger? And the Prophet ﷺ didn't respond at the time. Later on he explained that if I said yes, it would have been compulsory every year. But it's not compulsory every year. It's compulsory once in a lifetime, and only for those who are able and capable to fulfill the Hajj. So primarily, we as Muslims, if someone were to ask us, why do you have to fulfill the Hajj? The have to part of it is only because it's an instruction of Allah. But what is the broader benefit of the Hajj? What's the history of the Hajj? Then we can get into Ibrahim alayhi salam and the whole story of Hajar and the whole story of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his time, and so on. So that's quite an interesting factor that I think we should make mention of.
Definitely. I think one interesting part of the hadith that you mentioned, which is Man istata'a ilayhi sabila, will come to Sheikh Wasim, which is who is actually Hajj an obligation upon, a faridah upon? Because again, many people sitting at home are watching and thinking, do I have to go for Hajj this year? Maybe I don't have enough money. There might be students watching or fresh graduates. I want to go for Hajj, but do I have to? So this part of the hadith, how would we qualify that, Sheikh?
Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. So the scholars have spoke about the different conditions that need to be fulfilled before the Hajj becomes an obligation upon anybody. But to put aside the issues of the person reaching the age of puberty, that the fact that they were Muslim and they have a sound mind, essentially some of the scholars, they put it down to 2. They say az-zadu wal-rahila, that the person has the financial means of performing that particular pilgrimage, and also the means of getting there, meaning that you have a safe way of you performing the Hajj and also returning. And in talking a little bit more about the financial side of it, that they mention that it is upon the individual for him or herself to have the means financially to pay. Let's talk about from the husband's point of view, or the male's point of view. He has responsibility for his family, for example, that when he is away and he goes alone, that he is able to financially make sure that his family is sound and they're not living in any form of poverty. So this also is discussed when we're talking about the financial side, apart from the issues of health and capability and things like that. But these are essentially the two issues, the main two issues that the scholars talk about, is the financial side of it and the means of actually going to Mecca and returning safely.
Okay, I'm just bouncing off that, Sheikh, because again, it's a very common question, which is for those people who might not necessarily have the means to go, financially speaking, do they have to go out of their way to basically, like, if a person maybe isn't earning enough, but they need to try and get 2-3 jobs, juggling those jobs just to perform that obligation? Is that what's required? Because again, it's a very common question.
Yeah, okay, so it's a sound question. And let's put more of a realistic scenario on that. So you could say technically that each year, if a person put away a certain amount of money, and then after about 15 years, that they would be able to have that enough money to perform the Hajj. Is it an obligation for a person to save up for the Hajj? The ulama, they say there's not a must for a person to actually save up and put money aside specifically for the Hajj itself. But the moment that a person does have the financial means, meaning that if they have a job which pays them well enough that they put money aside, not just for that, but for anything, only then when that money reaches that particular amount, that the Hajj would become then an obligation upon them. So if it was said otherwise, you could possibly say that the vast majority of people may then fall into sin. I mean, how is it that you can't, after if a person lives for 50, 60 or 70 years, and you don't put a small amount of money away, you might find the vast majority of people dying in sin. And no one says that, alhamdulillah. So that's not the case at all. Allah knows.
Okay, alhamdulillah. And Sheikh Asim, want to touch on Hajj in the Quran. We'll come back, inshallah, to some of the rulings later. But there is actually, in fact, there is an entire surah which is titled Surah Al-Hajj. What's interesting is actually when you start reciting the surah initially in the beginning, there's really no mention of Hajj. It's like mentions of the afterlife, mentions of the creation of Allah, and then like some rulings come later on. So it's quite interesting what aspects of Hajj are actually in this surah, and also if you could maybe, why does sometimes Allah discuss all these different aspects? Is there a correlation, is there a link between Hajj and what else is mentioned in the surah?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It's an interesting question because, like, if you read Surah Yusuf, your expectation would be, I'm going to hear about the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, and that expectation is definitely fulfilled from the very beginning until the end. Surah Al-Hajj, I think, in the chapter of pilgrimage, surely this is going to start by talking about the pilgrimage, but it doesn't. Allah begins, Ya ayyuhan nas ittaqu rabbakum inna zalzalat as-sa'ati shay'un 'azim. A very hard-hitting verse where Allah says, humanity, fear your master, for the quake of the hour is extremely violent. And then Allah will say, وَتَرَى النَّاسَ سُكَارَى وَمَا هُمْ بِسُكَارَى وَلَكِنَّ عَذَابَ اللَّهِ شَدِيدٌ. That you'll see people as if they're in a drunken state, heading in every single direction, but they're not drunk, except that the punishment of Allah is extremely severe, which is basically a picture of what will happen on the Day of Judgment. May Allah make it easy for every single one of us. So somebody would think to themselves, okay, so why does Surah Al-Hajj about pilgrimage begin by talking about the Day of Judgment? And in fact, later on, the next few verses speak about the way a human being is developed in the womb of the mother. The way these things tie up, some of the scholars explain, is that the Hajj is like a rehearsal for the Day of Judgment.
Wow.
And it's quite phenomenal when you start to piece this together, where you think about the etiquette of a person before they leave for Hajj is they should seek people's forgiveness. Imam Nawawi mentioned this. They should clear their debts, i.e. the short-term debts that they have, and they should bid farewell to their family. They say, I entrust your faith and your belongings in the trust of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as if they are not going to see them again. as if it's a one-way ticket. But then it starts to get even more intense when you have to put on the ihram, especially for men, the 2 unstitched pieces of clothes, which are white in colour. And you think to yourself, when's the second time in my life that I'm going to wear 2 white garments? It's going to be when I'm being shrouded.
Exactly, yeah.
And being put in the grave, death. And then you think about the day of Arafah. And I'm sure everyone who's been to Arafah and been blessed and been fortunate enough to go, one of the things you experience is the sea of people. That they are in the most, if you like, closest position to their master, beseeching him, begging for his forgiveness, and they're speaking to Allah in their different languages. So you see people from different countries speaking different languages, all of them as if they are in deep need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you think about that, that's exactly what is going to happen on the Day of Judgment. We are all going to be gathered together in one place, and we will see humanity as a sea of people, and we will all be in desperation, presenting our knees before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you can go on, even Muzdalifah, sleeping on the bare ground, right? There's no hotels, there's no tents, there's nothing, sleeping on the bare ground, and you will wake up, and this is in the middle of the Hajj, you know, with your hair not gelled up, disheveled, dusty, tired, and you'll wake up and you'll see everyone else like this as well. And the Prophet said on the Day of Judgment, you'll see people emerge out their graves, uncircumcised, naked, barefoot. And it's this, the parallels are striking.
Wow.
So in a way, Surah Al-Hajj is very aptly starting with the very spirit of Hajj, which is a rehearsal of the Day of Judgment. And later on it does speak about the Hajj, of course, and Ibrahim alayhi salam, etc., etc. So this is perhaps one way the scholars, you know, they connect the dots.
Very interesting, actually. That's something I've never looked at it from that perspective. So I think, inshallah, it's something that all of us can benefit from. Coming back, actually, because really this episode is mainly going to focus on the Hajj itself, the journey of a lifetime, and the rulings. How important is it, Mufti Menk, that people actually educate themselves before going for Hajj? Because it's quite an easy thing, maybe. You've booked your tickets, you're excited, it's overwhelming, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to go and do it. I've seen it on TV many times. But how important is it to actually educate yourself before you go?
You know, for any act of worship, we have to make sure that we have the knowledge of how to fulfill that act of worship, because we will be wasting our time. Imagine Salah. If you say, I'm going to fulfill the Salah, and then you arrive at the masjid and you don't know what to do, you know, you would look foolish. So this is why it's very important. In fact, it's connected to the acceptance of the Hajj, to know what an acceptable Hajj is. You know, you got to know the arkan, you got to know what is to be fulfilled, the do's, the don'ts, the ihram, what you should be doing. You have to actually educate yourself. And like I've given the example, anything for that matter, in terms of acts of worship, you know, one of the conditions of an acceptable act of worship is it must be done as per the instruction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and teaching, and for the sake of Allah alone.
One question I actually forgot to ask all of you is if you've actually been for Hajj, if you've been blessed with the opportunity. Unfortunately, I haven't yet. I've been for Umrah 5 times, alhamdulillah. But make dua, inshallah, I get to go for Hajj. So, Mufti Menk, I'm sure you've been, right?
Alhamdulillah, I studied in Medina, so you can imagine every year we used to seize the opportunity. At that time, there were no quotas and it wasn't as difficult as it is now. So, alhamdulillah, I've made Hajj quite a few times, mashallah.
And I guess it must be the same for Sheikh Wasim?
Yeah, similarly, alhamdulillah.
Yeah? Alhamdulillah. And are you going, when we say this year, are you going very literally in the next,
inshallah,
very soon?
The intention is to go bi-idhnillah ta'ala.
Inshallah. And Sheikh Asim, you've been as well?
We have, yes, alhamdulillah. The first time I went, it was actually unplanned. I was given an opportunity to go 2 weeks before people were leaving. So a friend of mine, he runs one of these Hajj companies. He said, there's a couple, they've dropped out. And subhanAllah, the husband had a heart attack.
SubhanAllah.
He survived, but he had a heart attack. So he said, you have 1 hour to decide if you can, and it will be half price.
Wow.
So I just started working then as well. And I was like, you know, what am I going to do with this? So I phoned my wife. I said, you might want to sit down for this one. Should we go Hajj? We have to decide in 1 hour, in 2.5 weeks' time. She said,
so in 1 hour you decide?
Bismillah, let's do it, inshallah.
Wow.
So it was, and the thing is what Mufti was saying, subhanAllah, about you need to prepare well in advance. It does help a lot, because when I did that Hajj, you know, I didn't get that much time to prepare mentally and obviously in terms of knowledge, and it affected the experience of Hajj and how meaningful it was and how much of a connection you have. And the time after that, it was completely different, because there was preparation involved, and it helps and it goes a long way, subhanAllah. So I really...
Was that in 2009?
Yes.
I met you there.
Allahu Akbar. Yes, that's true. I met the Sheikh.
I remember I met you there.
Wow, mashallah.
Yeah, mashallah. You know, if I can add something to what Sheikh Asim was saying, preparation is on two fronts. Number one is the religious aspect of what you should do and not do. And number two is to know from people who have been there, you know, in the last few Hajjs that have just gone by, what to expect of the accommodation and what's a better idea and where to stay perhaps. And, you know, from that living aspect, because a lot of us are spoilt when we're, you know, in our own homes. And sometimes we think we're going to be having something 5-star, but you don't know when you go to Makkah, 5-star translates as about 3-star or 2-star in a lot of cases, you know. When they say this is khamsa nujum, it doesn't necessarily mean, you know. So it's preparation on both sides. Another quick thing that I learned is, because I made Hajj many years back, the last time I made Hajj was in 2001. And at that time, you know, the jamarat and everything was very different. So for me to give someone advice about, you know, what to expect will not be as powerful or as accurate as the advice given by the sheikhs who've been there last year or who are going right now and so on. So the preparation from all these aspects and angles.
Are you planning to go soon, inshallah?
Inshallah, look, if Allah wills, perhaps next year maybe. Let's see how things go.
Inshallah. I hope to see you there, inshallah.
Inshallah. I haven't taken my family along, so this will be a good opportunity, inshallah.
Inshallah. You know, we're talking about like preparation and logistics and that side of things, but you know, for someone who hasn't been for Hajj, a lot of the times we're kind of scared. People scare you. They're like, you know what, when you go there, it's going to be crazy and this happens and that happens. Like when you go for Umrah, it's a stroll in the park, right? Alhamdulillah. But when you go for Hajj, people tell you all sorts. You know, you're going to get crushed, this is going to happen, there's so much to do, you're going to be in Ihram for this amount of days. Is that true from yourselves who have actually been?
I can tell you something. A lot of the times the Umrah is actually more busy nowadays than the Hajj. That's what I feel. Because I tell you what, you take a look at it, Mecca is full and Medina is full, both at the same time for Umrah. When it comes to Hajj, all of the people gather in one place. Medina will be empty at that time. You know, and nowadays, I was there in Ramadan just for a day, but this Ramadan that just passed, and to be honest, I'd never seen crowds like those in my life. And I've been for many Hajj. I don't know if the Hajj has gotten bigger right now, but I don't think it could have been, you know, this size some time back. May Allah make it easy.
Ameen, ameen. Since we're on the topic, Sheikh Wasim, so what actually happens when you go for the Hajj? If we can maybe get a breakdown. Of course, I feel like it's one of those things where you can prepare and you can study, but really you need to go there to really experience it and then share that experience. So what actually happened, Sheikh?
If you don't mind, I just want to follow on from something that Mufti mentioned earlier. I remember a few years ago, it's common practice that you have a Hajj seminar before you take the company takes the people to the Hajj. So I was asked to do the Hajj seminar, the preparation, where all those people who are on your package, they'll come, they'll attend, and you go through some logistics, and you explain the Hajj and so on. And as somebody who's been on Hajj a number of times with a number of different kind of packages and whatnot, I've learned a few. I don't want to say. I was going to say, well, I don't want to say tricks, but you learn some realities to tell the people before they go. So we did the Hajj seminar, and as I'm explaining what they're going to expect, I gave it to them worst case scenario, going through the whole kind of procedure of the Hajj. The brothers who were part of the Hajj company came to me halfway and they said, "Are you trying to scare them away from making Hajj with us? What are you doing to them?" I said, no, it's good to bring them down. If you start saying how great your company is and what you're going to provide for them, it's not only 5-star, we'll make that 6th star for you and so on. I said, you're going to place them so high that when they go to places like Muzdalifah and they go to places like Arafah where things are not in your hands at all, they're going to bring you down. So I said, let me finish the seminar and let them expect almost nothing.
And then get the...
And then when they go there, and they're in, they go to places like Muzdalifah and Arafah, they're like, wow, this is amazing, mashallah. So preparation is extremely important for the Hajj. And the 2 acts of worship that the Prophet ﷺ said himself to do as I have done, you find the most narrations on that. So the Prophet ﷺ said to us, pray as you have seen me praying. There are so many narrations concerning the description of the prayer. Because the companions, when they heard that, they would note absolutely everything. Similarly, the most narrations that you'll find on an act of ibadah after salah is Hajj. The Prophet ﷺ said that you will take from me the rites of Hajj. And bearing in mind that the Prophet ﷺ performed Hajj only once in his life, ﷺ, there are so many narrations and so detailed about the Hajj itself. So before a person goes to perform Hajj, really don't have any excuse about being ignorant. And we were discussing earlier that one of the biggest problems that people have when performing Hajj is studying Hajj when making Hajj. It's one of the biggest problems. Because in that you'll find so many differences of opinion, so many approaches, that I have to perform this sunnah. And then the group will say, well, we don't have permission to go to that place at the moment, and you may get lost. No, but I'm going to perform Hajj once in my life. I have to perform this sunnah. I have to enter this particular valley at this time of the day, and then I'm going to wait there for 3 hours, and then I'm going to enter Arafah. People just have a lack of understanding concerning the Hajj. To go through the whole Hajj, what I would say is that it's a journey of a lifetime. It's something that if you do correctly and understand prior to going, that it'll have the desired effect in changing your life. And the fact that the Prophet ﷺ said to us that the accepted Hajj has no other reward except the paradise, this doesn't mean, it's a very simple statement, but it's something very, very difficult to achieve.
Yeah, subhanallah.
I know you asked me another question, but I just wanted to, it's almost impossible to go through the whole 5 days of Hajj and whatnot. But this kind of information I'm mentioning, if you like, allows the person to prepare themselves in the best way for the Hajj.
Definitely, definitely. Like based on the description of Hajj, Sheikh Asim, we were speaking about Surah Al-Hajj in the first segment. Is there much detail in the surah about the actual rites of Hajj and what you would do? Or is it more kind of general points, would you say, and most of it would be found in the prophetic narrations?
The details of the legislation or the instruction to perform Hajj are carried out through the Prophet ﷺ, and that's the way it is taught to us. But the Quran does speak about preparing for Hajj. وَتَزَوَّدُوا فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. Allah says then, prepare, and the best provision or the best way to prepare is to have taqwa. And I think that's a very important point, because most people when they perform Hajj, they look at it as a tick box exercise where they need to do certain rituals at certain times in a certain manner, which is correct. However, that comes at the expense of feeling the wisdom and meaning behind those acts and those rituals. So to get to a point where people become obsessed, almost paranoid with the things they're not allowed to in ihram. So we know, for example, you're not allowed to cut or shave your hair. But then people ask questions like, am I allowed to look in the mirror for a long time? What if I wake up and there's a hair on the floor and I don't know whose hair it is? Should I investigate? And you're thinking, that is a symptom of a bigger problem, which is you've completely lost touch with why you're performing the act, the reason why it's legislated, the wisdom behind it, and you've become so focused on the do's and don'ts. And the Quran is setting the record straight by telling you it's a journey of the heart. The Hajj is supposed to be a journey of the heart, because the Prophet said, "At-taqwa hahuna." At-taqwa lives here, he said, which means Allah is telling you to prepare your heart for that journey. And the meaning of taqwa can be spoken about in length, but essentially it's the ability to rein in your desires and impulses out of an awareness and a connection with Allah. And when you go on Hajj, you get tested. You get tested in many ways. You see some very strange things, and some people do some unkind things to you, like not being able to wait in a queue, even though it's part of our culture to wait in a queue. So you see things and people push and shove, and it really does test you. And that is your moment to gain the benefit of Hajj, which is, I'm not going to lash out, I'm not going to argue, not going to get angry, I'm going to train my heart to say no to impulse for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everything, if you start looking at it from this perspective, starts to make sense, you start to connect, and even though there's chaos sometimes, and you're stuck maybe on a coach in the middle of the street where you've been in a standstill for an hour, you can still find meaning in that, because you're like, this is supposed to be jihad. This is supposed to be the difficulty that Allah spoke about, training myself. And now, a moment of, whining and moaning could turn into a moment of worship and reward.
I feel like that's such a big factor when you go for Hajj, like having that sabr, having patience. I think that's a huge bit of practical advice we can give, right? Surely when you get there, there's like millions of people. You have a smile on your face.
I have a smile on my face because I want to follow up from what he said. Very true, accurate. I believe, and it's not wahi or something, but I believe I've seen a lot of people who are tested in matters that they have been spoiled regarding back at home. Like if you come from a very spacious house, for some reason, your hotel room is going to be so narrow that you're going to barely be able to put your bags and your feet. That's just your test. If you have a beautiful bathroom, you're going to have a 3-in-1. You know what's a 3-in-1? You have the toilet there, the shower there, and the sink there. That's it. So this thing happens. It's like Allah saying, hang on, this is a journey of a lifetime, you know. And we're going to see it's your moment to shine, to actually earn that Jannah, to say, no problem, this is secondary. These are not primary issues. I've seen wealthy people back in the day who would fight and jostle for a bottle of water that's being thrown off a truck, but they can afford to buy 1,000 bottles. But for some reason, that free bottle tastes better or something. And you wouldn't believe what they get up to. So this is so accurate that it just brings back memories. And I think to myself, you know, you're so right. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who tests us with every little thing. I had the opportunity of meeting my grandfather, my uncle, who was in his 70s at the time. And I was a student in Medina, and I went to the hotel where they were. At that time, there were no mobiles, or, you know, it wasn't as advanced as it is now. And the people were telling me we had a very tough journey. You know, the bus was stuck. We actually were stuck for 16 hours. Another bus came, and we had to take the bus. And these are people from America. He lives in the United States. So when I met him for the first time in my life, they said, that's the man sleeping at the end. It was like a dormitory with about 20 beds, right? So the last bed, there was, you know, the lights were on, the air conditioning, the fans were on, the people were making noise, and he was sleeping. And so what happened, very strangely, I got to him, I tapped him, he got up, he saw me, he was so happy, he probably recognized who I was, and I recognized him immediately. He looks a little bit like my dad. And I told him, oh, assalamu alaikum, how are you? He said, very good. I said, how was your journey? He said, absolutely lovely. And he was so happy. And I'm like, but these guys said, you know, the bus was stuck for 16 hours, you know. He said, yeah, 16 hours, nothing, you know. I just read my salah, I had a bit of food, and I slept for 8 hours under the bus. And I'm like, under the bus, isn't it dangerous? He said, no, the bus was totally stuck. We were waiting for another bus. And I thought, let me just sleep. So the point I'm raising is he was so happy with everything that happened. And the others were complaining. From that day, I learned that, you know what? It depends on how you look at it. If you're ready, 16 hours means nothing to you. If you're not ready, even 4 hours will be a very, very long journey.
Yeah, I think it's just being grateful that you're actually there, you have that opportunity.
And be prepared for anything and everything. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to get there. So even if it took you 24 hours to get there, it's okay. It might have been a little bit of a struggle, but if you're prepared mentally for that, you can go for it, inshallah.
Yeah, it's very important. Sheikh Wasim, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, you know, Sheikh Asim was mentioning, as well as Mufti, about the importance of being patient and having realistic expectations. And we know the Hajj itself has different stages, different parts of the Hajj over a period of a number of days. And the pinnacle of the Hajj is, if you like, you can say, the day of Arafah. That the fact that the Prophet ﷺ, Al-Hajj Arafah, said it is the essence of Hajj is the day of Arafah. And that is a day where, if you want your Hajj to be valid, everybody has to be there on that day. And on that day, which for some reason is just always a hot day, subhanAllah, whatever time Hajj is throughout the year, it's just always a very hot day. In the desert, very loosely kind of covered with the kind of tents that you have. You're out there making dua, spilling your heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's a very intense day for every single person making a Hajj. Now, at the end of that time, that's where everybody is going to go back to Muzdalifah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this time as that it is that the people are flowing back to, in Surah Al-Baqarah, that the people are flowing back like water flows, just like streams of people back to these areas. But at the same time, as I'm mentioning, that this is the very pinnacle and the most important, one could argue, part of the Hajj. This is the most likely time for a person to lose their Hajj. And I've seen this by myself. My own eyes, I've seen it year after year. And what is this time? This is where people are, they've been out in the sun quite possibly, they're feeling tired, and then they're waiting for their coach or their ride to be taken back from Arafah to Muzdalifah. which is about a 3 or 4 hour walk because of the crowds and the timings and whatnot. So most people, at least if you're in those areas, they will wait for their buses. And because you're in your particular area, the designated area, the people draw lots. So your turn might be 7 out of 10. There's 10 groups in one area, so you're 9 out of 10, or you're 3 out of 10. I have seen people, grown men, people who you perceive as very practicing people. This is the time where, for whatever reason, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests them at this particular time, where you were there opening your heart, and at the very end you can lose everything at this particular time. So I would encourage those who make Hajj that at any stage where you feel that you're becoming angry or upset, just remember why you are there. That when you go back to your home, to your country, all that waiting, all that patience that you demonstrated, you will realize that it was all worth it. And that little scuffle or word that you gave back to a person, you will regret it so much. So how important it is to be patient throughout the whole journey.
Yeah, very good advice. Very good advice. On the note of on the day of Arafah, Sheikh Suhail, I mean, in terms of the seerah, because this is what you teach on Eman Academy, this seems to be quite a significant day even in the seerah, and something unique that the Prophet ﷺ did, because he only did it once in his life. The Hajj was actually it's known as the Farewell Hajj, and it's the farewell sermon which he delivered actually in this region of Arafah. What actually happened, and if you could maybe take us through the Prophet ﷺ Hajj and maybe some of the points that he mentioned in his sermon.
Jazakallah khair. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As-salatu was-salam ala Rasulillah. It's very difficult to summarize the Hajj of the Prophet ﷺ because it's very well documented, particularly in the hadith of Jabir ibn Abdullah. It spans over 3 to 4 pages, where it goes into a lot of detail about the Hajj of the Prophet ﷺ. You're quite right that the Prophet ﷺ made Hajj once after the Hijrah and after the obligation of the Hajj was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ. And it's not just called the farewell pilgrimage by the scholars of Seerah. It was actually known as the farewell pilgrimage, Hajjatul Wada', in the time of the Prophet ﷺ.
Okay.
During this actual Hajj, the Prophet ﷺ was bidding farewell to the Sahaba. But to the Sahaba, the Prophet ﷺ is their whole world. Yeah. They did not compute in their minds that this means the Prophet ﷺ is soon to pass away. In fact, if you look at the Hajj of the Prophet ﷺ, it took place in the 10th year after Hijrah. The Prophet ﷺ set out from Medina on the 25th of Dhul Qa'dah. Within 2.5 months, on the 12th of Rabi'ul Awwal, the Prophet ﷺ passed away. Wow. So it was quite literally Hajjatul Wada', the farewell pilgrimage. Now we complain about 16 hours on a coach or 24 hours maybe waiting here or 5 hours at the airport. The Prophet ﷺ, he left Medina on the 25th of Dhul Qa'dah and he arrived in Mecca 10 days later. Wow. A 10-day journey. Subhanallah. Wow. And Jabir ibn Abdullah in his famous hadith, he speaks about how the Prophet ﷺ announced that he was making the Hajj around a month or so in advance. And the whole of Medina was just overwhelmed with Muslims coming and wanting to accompany the Prophet ﷺ in the Hajj. He said he looked to the right, he looked to the left, he looked in front, he looked behind, and all he could see was Sahaba coming to accompany the Prophet ﷺ. I often try and visualize that moment. It must have been one of the most spectacular sights in the entire seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. Some scholars of seerah even talk about 100,000 Sahaba. And you also had Sahaba coming from Yemen under the leadership of Ali and Abu Musa al-Ashari. So many Sahaba coming with the Prophet ﷺ. They went to the miqat of Dhul Hulayfa. They assumed the ihram. And then they went making the labbaik, the talbiyah. What a sight it must have been. And in fact, Jibreel came to the Prophet ﷺ and insisted to the Prophet ﷺ that he informed the companions to raise their voices in the talbiyah. It must have been quite a remarkable sight. Your question about the farewell sermon, it actually was a sermon in many parts. So we often have the framed sermon of the Prophet ﷺ, which is truly profound. It speaks about the fundamentals of religion, about respect, about unity, about the essence of the Islamic finance system. It's really a comprehensive message delivered by the Prophet ﷺ towards the end of his life. But this actual sermon was delivered in parts. So there was a major part which was delivered in the Arafah, in the khutbah on the day of Arafah. But then there were other parts which were delivered also in the Ayyam al-Tashriq. The Prophet ﷺ was going to the different parts, to the tents of Mina, and delivering this sermon as well.
You know, one question I have, it might sound like a strange question, right? But you know, when we mentioned the amount of Sahaba who must have been there, up to maybe 100,000, right? Yeah. I always ask, okay, so if the Prophet ﷺ is delivering a sermon, how did that amount of people hear his sermon? You know, there was no microphone, loudspeaker, no system in place.
It's a good question. There are a couple of possibilities. There are actual Sahaba, I think Al-Abbas was one of them, who were actually repeating the message of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay. You know, those companions, prominent, loud voices, they were actually repeating the statements of the Prophet ﷺ. But there's something interesting I just read today, that there was some mu'jizat where people far, far away from the Prophet ﷺ were able to hear his voice clearly. So these are miracles which the Sahaba experience. Allahu A'lam, you know, yes, we can only speculate, but these details are mentioned in the books of Seerah.
SubhanAllah. Another very interesting fact about the traveling of the voice, you know, they didn't have the buildings and the distractions that we have today. It was a much more calm sort of environment where the voice would carry. If we were to speak at night, a whisper would go very far, you know. So it also depends on what's happened. Nowadays you have a lot of distractions, electronic age. You have the walls and the fans and the air conditions, which make it very difficult even in the masajid. But I think that would also contribute. Again, the miracle was definitely there where the Prophet ﷺ's voice traveled. You know, greater, him being the one whom Allah has placed the burden on his shoulders to actually convey the message, and it was miraculous. You know, just thinking of it was, you know, brought tears to my eyes. It's really amazing to see people from one person and so many people persecuting them in Mecca to tens of thousands to 100,000 and beyond of Muslims is something just amazing.
Sheikh Wasim, I had a quick question actually, which is more to do with, you know, we mentioned the Prophet ﷺ only performed the Hajj once in his lifetime. So could someone then say, you know, I have the ability to go for Hajj again, but because the Prophet ﷺ did it once, I'm only going to go once. What would you say about that?
Okay, so the obligation is once in your life, for sure. And if you have you fulfill that obligation, then on the Day of Judgment you can say to Allah Jalla wa Ala that I've fulfilled the obligation. But if Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala blesses you with the ability, the health, the wealth to go more than once, then why would, you know, you kind of look from a logical perspective, why would somebody pass up the opportunity? If they passed it up, they're not sinful.
Sure.
But why would somebody, maybe they have other reasons to utilize their wealth in other areas. Okay, that's absolutely fine. But I'm talking about other than that, you know, looking after your family and supporting your family and the other obligations you have at home. On top of that, that you have an opportunity to go to Hajj. I think that if somebody has performed the Hajj the first time and has done the Hajj in the way that it should be done, I don't think that they would turn down the opportunity to do it again. If you really understood what it was about the first time, then you would pray to Allah Jalla wa Ala that you have that opportunity to go again.
Again and again.
So if a person has that, maybe they should go again. They should be told to go again, because if you went and you did it the first time the way and you took what you should have took from it, then you should have this urge and desire to go again and again. If a person doesn't have that desire, maybe they should be advised that maybe you need to go again.
If I can just add to what Sheikh Wasim said, it's a little bit, it doesn't give the full picture to say the Prophet ﷺ just made Hajj once. This is literally correct. But you have to understand the context. So for example, in the Meccan phase, the Prophet ﷺ was attending the Hajj year after year, giving da'wah, especially after the year of grief and when Abu Talib, his patron, and political support died, he was going and visiting the tribes one by one, offering Islam and offering himself. And this happened at least 3 consecutive years. Also, you have to understand that the Prophet ﷺ, his status and his magnanimous character and his lofty position, there was still a lot of work to be done before the Prophet ﷺ made Hajj. So Muslims were making Hajj after the conquest of Mecca. Although the Prophet ﷺ wasn't present, Ali, Abu Bakr, they were present, and still the mushrikeen were there, the pagans. Okay. They were still performing their obscene acts, dancing around the Kaaba naked, and performing their obscenities, and the Muslims had to first give them notice. The ayat of the Quran came down that you will not come back. So there were many factors which may have contributed to why the Prophet ﷺ didn't make Hajj before, or didn't make it many times. Also, according to some scholars of tafsir, that the ayat regarding Hajj, وَأَتِمُّ الْحَجْجَ, not the ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah, but the ayat in Surah Ali Imran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that mankind owes to Allah the duty of Hajj. Yeah. Some scholars believe this was revealed in the 9th year after Hijri, and the Prophet ﷺ immediately made Hajj in the 10th year. So it's sometimes not very representative to say the Prophet ﷺ made Hajj once. It could be the Prophet ﷺ made Hajj immediately after the verse was revealed, and due to the nature of the Hajj being the culmination of the message of Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala soon took his life after the message is complete. Yes. And in that Hajj, the verse was revealed, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum deenakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakum al-Islam deena. This day I perfected the religion of Islam for you, completed my favor upon you, and chosen for you Islam as your religion. So it was circumstance that the Prophet ﷺ performed the Hajj once, but even when he made Hijrah from Mecca to Medina, he turned around to Mecca and he said, "You are the most beloved land to me. And were it not that your people had expelled me, I would never have left you." And the Prophet ﷺ, of course, made Umrah, and he was prevented, and then he made Umrah the following year. So there was always a deep and strong connection with the Haram, with Mecca for the Prophet ﷺ. But it was the circumstances of the seerah which meant the Prophet ﷺ only was able to make that Hajj journey once. And we should remember that it's... And also these Arabs of the time, they understood exactly what Hajj was. So when they did it, they did it. For us, it's like an unraveling experience. You do it once, you think about it, the memories come back to you, you appreciate, you do it again, you learn a bit more, like Sheikh Asim mentioned, and it's sometimes an iterative process for us. It's not like the time of the Prophet ﷺ.
You know, if I can add something very interesting from a totally different dimension, while I definitely agree that, given the opportunity and, the ability, it's okay to go back again and so on. Your farad is done with the one, and then you may go given the opportunity. But I've been to countries where they've told me, like Indonesia, that you put your name on a list and you only get to go to Hajj 20 years later. That is something you guys probably don't know in UK. In South Africa, it takes about 4 to 5 years. If I put my name now that I'm able to go for Hajj, you won't believe it. In South Africa, the chances of you getting accepted this year are almost zero. You will have to wait for a year, 2 years. Some people who are married are divorced by the time husband and wife are both accepted for Hajj. And some people who are not married are then married and they want to go with their spouse and they can't. So I think because of the quota system, we have to be a little bit conscious of the place where we are. You're fortunate in the UK. I think it's quite easy because your quota is quite big compared to the number of people who want to go. In Zimbabwe, we are quite fortunate because the number of wealthy who afford the Hajj happen to be within the quota approximately. I don't know of anyone who hasn't been when they wanted to go the same year. But in countries like South Africa, Nigeria, the Far East Asia, and several other countries, there is a long waiting list. So sometimes a lot of people look at the scholars who go every year and they say, look at this guy, look at this guy. But we have to teach them to say, no, hang on, these are teachers, these are tutors, these are agents, and they're going. I remember last year I was asked a question about, is it okay to lie on your form that you haven't been before? Because if you say you've been before, they put the form right at the bottom. And I'm like, you're going for Hajj, you know, how can you lie? Don't lie on the form, just say, look, I've been, and so on. So there are a few factors that sometimes, based on your circumstances, you may not be aware of. It is good to give others a chance as well, where the population is such that, you know, they're struggling to even go. If someone sees you going every year, it's not so fair. But if you're in a country where you're fortunate and you can go, then why not? May Allah make it easy.
I mean, since we're coming now towards the end of the show, alhamdulillah, it's been very enjoyable, but we just wanted to hear actually just some of your own experiences going for Hajj in the very short time that we have, and even some last bits of advice. We've already said, you know, to have sabr, we've spoken about taqwa, we've spoken about preparing, the logistic side of things, but any kind of last kind of stories and last bits of experience from yourselves, inshallah.
You know, if I can start, if you don't mind. You know, the funniest thing that happened, I've made Hajj about 7 times, in fact 8, if I count the last one, 7 times when I was a student. And what happened is, one of the Hajjas, I remember clearly, there was a person who came with a huge stick to beat up shaitan.
Wow.
And when I made Hajj, you know, that pelting was actually done, you know, where there was a pillar, and you could get very close to the pillar. I think now it's all changed. I've seen it just when I went to visit, but not during the Hajj. So this guy was beating up shaitan with his stick and uttering something, you know, saying words and so on. And I saw him later on, and I told him, you were beating. He says, yeah, shaitan, you know, he troubles us and he does this. And I thought this is a chance. So I told him something interesting. I said, you know what? It's the shaitan within. Actually, with each stone that you're throwing out, think to yourself, this is a bad habit going, you know. So say my pride went with the first stone, you know. And for example, the falsehood that I engage in gone with the next one. I'm not gonna lie again. I said, if you have your 7 major sins or major matters that you're gonna take out the first day, you're gonna become a clean person. And he was like, oh wow, I didn't look at it that way. Some people actually believe, and this is lack of education, that we're going there, we're gonna be face to face with this devil, and they really think they're gonna beat the devil. So that happens a lot, I think. There was a video clip doing its rounds of a person who took his slipper, and he ran up to this devil as though he's gonna, you know, as though he's a cricketer or something, and he mid-wicket.
Subhanallah, it's crazy.
Allah make it easy.
Sheikh Wasim, because you've been, alhamdulillah, much more recently. Just from your experience, any last bit of advice that you would give?
See, what I would say is, and it's not necessarily is the case with everybody, the most memorable Hajj, and I can somewhat say the most enjoyable Hajj that I made was my first Hajj. That was more than 20 years ago, like maybe 22 years ago, something like this. And that was the Hajj that I had at that particular time. Is very different from now. You didn't have to have special places and tents designated for you. It was much freer. You could go from one place to the next. Of course, it's very different now. You have to be at certain places and quotas and whatnot. So we weren't breaking the law in any way. That's going against the authorities. But that's the time I had least preparation for anything. We didn't have any hotels. We didn't have any, because I was a student at the time, we didn't have any hotels. We didn't have any designated places in any Mina, Muzdalif or Arafah. We walked everywhere. Looking back on it, that was my most enjoyable Hajj. Probably physically the most demanding, but the one I enjoyed the most. This is something personal for me.
Yeah, sure.
But you know, may Allah as well accept from us all. I mean, that was to make that Hajj.
And finishing off with Sheikh Suhail, last bit of advice for us.
Last bit of advice, a bit controversial, is my favourite part of Hajj and Umrah is kissing the black stone.
Okay.
Yeah, kissing the black stone. So there is a technique to it.
Okay. Interesting.
And you've got to be prepared, particularly if you're, you know, a strong man. You've got to be prepared to take a few knocks, but not to harm any other Muslim.
Yeah, sure.
It is totally haram to go there, elbow, kick, punch, do martial arts moves on other Muslims. Okay. But if you go to the Yemeni corner and just queue up, and be prepared to queue for 45 odd minutes, you will slowly creep closer and closer to the front towards the black stone. And that's the moment when you've got to take your opportunity.
Okay.
I remember the first time I went, there was in front of me a huge Iranian guy, you know, a lot of the Iranians are like Olympic wrestlers, they're very big. And I remember he was causing havoc at the front, throwing people out the way and pushing them. And I remember, I know Iranians don't really speak Arabic, but I was trying to communicate with him. I said, Isbir akhi, have patience, my brother. Have patience, my brother. And he's pushing people out the way. He's kissing, he's rubbing the black stone, he's hogging it. And I'm really trying to tell him to stop harming others. So he turned around, he looked at me with this death stare. And I thought, oh my God, what's he going to do now? He reached out, he grabbed my neck and he said, come. And he threw my head into the black stone. And he protected me while I managed to kiss the black stone and left. And every time, alhamdulillah, I've tried, mashallah, I've managed to get to the black stone. I haven't gone many times, just a couple of times. But sometimes people can look down very kind of almost arrogantly as Muslims. Look what these people are doing. Look how it's disgusting, it's disgraceful. I mean, try and imagine, say, a game of football, where you've got 50,000 in the crowd. You need police, you need horses, you need security cameras. This is 4 million people self-regulating, performing their acts of worship. It's amazing. It's a miracle. It's a living miracle.
I think we're definitely going to have to try that tactic next time. Jazakumullah khairan. That is the end of the show, subhanAllah.
By the way, when are you going to go for Hajj, inshallah?
Inshallah, I hope to join you next year.
Inshallah.
We make dua. Inshallah. For those of our viewers who have not been, we make dua that inshallah you are able to go, you're invited soon. And for those of you who have been, we make dua that you're able to return again and again, inshallah. I wanted to thank our shuyukh. Thank you so much for your contributions. Really enjoyed it, alhamdulillah. And to our viewers, don't forget, of course, to make dua for all of us here in these blessed days of Hajj, inshallah. From myself, Shabir, and from our shuyukh, we will see you next time, inshallah. Take care. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.